So we got Rachel and Monica here. I guess the rest of our friends have joined us. Nobody got that? Oh, okay. I see what kind of audience we're going to have today. Okay. Hello. How are you? It is so nice to be in the room and to see so many familiar faces in this space. And also, thanks again, Chris, for inviting me. We are excited to have this conversation. I'm excited for the panel to hear. And you're right, Jennifer, conservation conversations is a mouthful. Well, we'll get through it. We have 30 minutes. Looks like actually we have less than 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to get to everyone with all the questions that we have. But let's just have a conversation. Let's just get into it and talk about it. We know one of the greatest strengths in Georgia is the abundance of natural resources. Each of your organizations, of course, utilize a range of unique strategies to conserve resources and productively reduce waste in production and your generation processes. Can you speak briefly about your organization's programs? And we'll just start in order and go down. You want to start, Rachel?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. So I work for a company called Premium Peanut. We are a farmer-owned cooperative based in Douglas, Georgia, and we shell about 10 to 15% of the U.S. peanut crop. We have really invested in making sure that our manufacturing facility is essentially zero waste, and we're really proud of that. I mean, we start with a great product, but peanuts are essentially zero waste throughout at this point. So we don't use a lot of water in our production facility, essentially just the employee bathrooms and break room. So that's already a good start. But we have really, the industry overall, and we as a company have invested in finding innovative ways to utilize the byproducts. So we installed an oil mill to use the inedible product. So that's used. The inedible product from the oil mill is then going into poultry feed. We are able to use peanut hulls, where we have partnered with a company now who makes pellets, and they are shipped, 100% of them are shipped to the UK for energy. And we also even use some of the foreign material that comes out of our shelling process. So our farmers actually fight over getting the gravel that comes out of the foreign material to use on their farms. So we are really proud of that. And I'll say, just overall in the ag community, we have invested in research heavily to try to become more productive with utilizing less resources across the board. Our farmers, we have about 500 grower owners at this point, and that only represents a fraction of the farmers in this state. But, we have become about 50% more productive over the past decade in the peanut world, just using less fertilizers, using less water, and improving varieties so that we're able to be more productive. So we're really proud of that. And that's thanks to land grants and a lot of companies and groups investing in that research. So I won't take up too much time.
Thank you. So I'm Patrick O'Rourke. I'm from Georgia Power. Not a typo in your program. I am a fisheries biologist, and I work for Georgia Power. So I work in our natural resources group. And so one of the big things my group works on is water. And for a couple decades now, Georgia Power has had a partnership with the Electric Power Research Institute for a research center called the Water Research Conservation Center. And what we're doing in that is going in and looking at how can we reduce the amount of water that we use for cooling water for power plants and other parts of the generation process. So we're trying to be an industry leader in that. As the grid has transitioned, we've gotten away from coal a little bit, moved towards other things. In the last couple of decades, Georgia Power's water use has gone down about 90%. So a lot more water out there to circulate around in our rivers. When we think about land, we're a big landholder. We have to have a lot of land holdings for buffer sites, for future plant sites, for things like that. But we don't let that land go to waste, right? We actively manage it for forests. A lot of that stuff is leased to Georgia DNR for wildlife management areas. So, a lot of times we think about waste as far as things that are just being tossed away and thrown out, but we're actually not wasting that land that we're stewards of. When you look even more specifically into our generation processes, we're dealing with coal ash ponds right now, and we use some of the leftovers from the coal ash process with fly ash. We're continuing to look for new ways to reuse that waste. And then you heard a little bit about the demand side management stuff from Dustin. We're constantly working on that to reduce the actual energy waste of our customers.
What you're doing with coal ash is really, really looking forward to hearing more about that and learning more about that because we know that's a very serious thing to do.
I'm Seth Winger. I'm with the University of Georgia. UGA, like other institutions, does have its own sustainability program where we, focus on waste reduction, efficiency, et cetera. But we're also an educational institution, and so training is a big part of where we are in the sustainability space. One of our fastest growing certificate programs is the undergraduate sustainability certificate. We also have a graduate sustainability certificate program. We're always looking for more partners, internships for our students, and so I'd love to talk with any of you about that if you see opportunities at your organization. And we're also interested in input into how we can better be training folks to be working with y'all. And then we do research. We're interested in innovation, not just in technology innovation and sustainability space, but also in processes and systems. My area is water. One of my roles is serving as the Director of Science at the River Basin Center, or River Basin Science and Policy Center, technically, which is about connecting the water-related expertise at UGA with management and policy needs. Just to give a quick example of kind of projects that we do, a couple of years ago we worked with GDOT, Georgia Department of Transportation, to help them more efficiently meet the requirements of the Endangered Species Act. And what we did was set up a system where they gave them a lot more flexibility in how they can do their construction and design their bridges and other projects that affect rivers and streams, flowing water systems. We've got a lot of imperiled species in Georgia in the aquatic side. And this gave them more flexibility to actually be more protective of the species at lower cost. And we codified this into a legal agreement with Fish and Wildlife Service, which also greatly speeds up the pace of approval for these projects. So that's kind of a win-win-win, and we're really excited to work on those. And one area we'd like to build is in our partnerships with corporations, businesses. We do a lot with federal agencies, state and local governments, and NGOs, but a lot less with corporate partners, and we really would like to expand that. It's a particularly exciting thing to work on water stuff in Georgia. I think this is the power to advance slides. I don't know if is that working or? Okay, I got it, we can see. I can see it down here. I don't know if y'all can see it. They're
great slides.
Can you see fish over there on the sides? Okay. Georgia is cool. It's part of one of the most important freshwater biodiversity hotspots in the world. Outside of the tropics, there are more species of fish, mussels, crayfish, other aquatic critters here than just about anywhere else. And I just had a few slides that are just illustrating some of these critters, just a few of those that occur in Georgia. I wish I could show you more, but I think it's underappreciated that we've got this amazing biodiversity right here in the state, and it's something I'd like to figure out how we can capitalize on more.
Well, that brings us to kind of the next question. Most sustainability programs are designed for the company, for their specific, kind of use. But do you see any opportunities for, market-wide initiatives? We talked a lot about water and why it's so important to conserve it for your business in particular. Are there ways that we can do initiatives that are broader together?
Well, from my perspective, we actually have just come together as an industry over the last year and a half, and we created the Sustainable U.S. Peanut Initiative. And what we are doing is really starting to collect the data because, I like to say farmers are the original conservationists. They want their land to be productive for generations to come because if it's not, they can't make a profit. And so something's in it for them too. they want their land to remain productive. And so they are investing in ways to be, to conserve their resources. And so what we're doing is we actually have a voluntary program for our peanut farmers across the United States now where they can voluntarily sign up, track everything from, what they're doing, reduce till, no-till, cover crops, the mileage that it takes to get them from their farm to the buying point where they deliver their peanuts, and a number of things. I mean, it tracks a lot, and we are working to be able to tell our story better because we have not been able to do that because we have not collected that data. So we have invested heavily in that, and we're hoping to grow it. It's in its infancy now. I mean, we have less than 200 growers signed up at this point, but we really hope to grow that. The American Peanut Council is actually spearheading that, but our company has been heavily involved in developing and funding it. But it sometimes takes a village to do these things, especially from an ag industry perspective. When you are dealing with a lot of individual growers who are individual businesses, it's unique. And so we really are trying to explain why this is important. Manufacturers, when we sell our peanuts to all the major manufacturers, they all have sustainability programs and they all have metrics to meet. And we want to be able, we know our peanuts are sustainable. We just need to be able to tell that story. So we are investing in collecting data right now.
So when you think about markets and this stuff, I mean, you have to step back and think about what is the value there, right? So a lot of what we work on are rare, threatened, and endangered species. And so you have to step back and say, how am I going to value that, right? There has to have a market, you have to have some sort of financial backing to that. So you can look at something like wetlands mitigation credits, like there is a market for that, right? Because people need to develop, people are restoring wetlands to account for that. Where I come from in fisheries, there's a concept called total allowable catch. They're called TACs. And basically the people that fish a certain fishery, let's say halibut in Alaska, own a portion of that catch share. So they're actually bought into the sustainability of that resource versus historically where everybody goes out and just tries to catch as much as they can, as fast as they can. So I think we have to think about that on the sort of things that we work on. So like one of the species we've worked on for several decades now at Georgia Power is the robust red horse. It was thought to be extinct for almost 150 years. We found it in a relicensing study. We've continued to work to conserve that. The driver for that is the Endangered Species Act. We want to keep it off of the ESA list. If you start thinking about a market, right, you can't think about the robust red horse in the same way you would think about a commercial fishery. There is no monetary value necessarily. It's just this, what's going on in the regulatory world, how is that going to impact everybody? So there are opportunities out there, but you have to really think those through of how are you actually going to value that natural resource and turn that into a market.
I think there's still opportunities for more use of markets for more efficient control of contaminants. I mean, nutrient trading is something I think we're going to see expanding. And I've got colleagues at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service who are very interested in the idea of establishing conservation banks, not wetland mitigation banks, but analogously to fund conservation areas for some of these threatened and endangered species. Particularly for species where you've got, we can define where they're at. We've got species that only live in springs, or only spawn in certain areas. For those, that protecting areas upland of that is critical. But there are limited mechanisms right now for doing that kind of basic land protection. And so I think there's some exciting potential there to further explore that.
The Nature Conservancy is involved with Albany State College, is it university, in the Georgia Fit program. And I know in that program, farmers are willing to sign up for an auction where they're testing their risk for not watering. Of course, Georgia's not in a drought right now. That was kind of, conceived when we were really, in a drought. So we think about these natural resources and we are mindful that they all have limitations more and more, especially in times of drought. Are there other programs that are being successfully implemented in other sectors, and when you think about it, that might be underutilized in the natural resource sector?
So one thought that comes to mind on that is we're hearing a lot about AI these days, right? It's going to revolutionize a lot of different market sectors. I don't know that we've thought very much about how that impacts conservation, how that impacts natural resources. You know, we're trained in sort of the biological sciences. We go out and we squeeze animals. You know, we're getting our boots muddy. And it's hard for us to think about how are we going to do something that's really automated, and how are we going to do machine learning and modeling for how to manage natural resources. But I think we're headed that direction. I just think the conservation world is going to be sort of kicking and screaming into that, because the professionals don't necessarily want to operate that way.
It's, interesting. We just got a new dean at the college that I'm attached to, and one of the things he said when he arrived to me was, hey, work on putting together a team of people to put a proposal for making us a leader in conservation AI. There's a lot of work to be done there, so we've been thinking about these issues. And I think you're right, that there's a lot of ground to be gained there. Environmental DNA is something that I think a lot of folks have probably heard about. It's measuring. We can take samples of water and know what species are in that water based on the small amounts of DNA that are there. There's a lot of work yet to be done to increase the accuracy of that. But there's big potential there for greater efficiency and just understanding the distribution of organisms and whether things are in different places. And, there's other uses for AI, not for fish so much, but for other organisms. We can put out microphones, basically recorders, and listen to bird calls and do bird assessments like that. Let the machine say what all those bird calls are. Same for frog calls and other taxa. So, that kind of pattern matching is one of the things that AI is really good at, right? People are also starting to use it for, like, if you pick up an individual fish you might have found before, but you haven't put a tag in, which is what we used to have to do. We can't put tags in really small fishes. That doesn't work. They just sit on the bottom. Yeah, right. The technology is getting to the point where we can now take a picture of that and compare it to past pictures and say, is this an individual that's been found before in this area? Which is going to really change how we do some of the studies, like mark recapture and our ability to estimate the sizes of populations. So I think there's those kinds of, it's pretty nerdy stuff, but there's potential there in the conservation realm for some dramatic changes to how we've been doing things.
Yeah, that certainly creates an opportunity for efficiencies and to have scientists be able to do more. And as I mentioned, we all know that most companies have a sustainability program, but knowing what you know now, and as long as we've been kind of doing this, what advice would you give companies if they're reassessing, or even startups if they're thinking about putting in a sustainability program? If you're looking through the lens of AI and you're looking through the things that we've learned, what kind of advice would you give to those companies?
I would say it's worth the investment, and to be creative and be innovative. I think that there is money out there for that. We as a company didn't participate in this, but the federal government had about $1 billion put out through USDA for creative ideas. And so I think, it is, the sky's the limit at this point, but it's worth the investment.
So I think focus on two kind of primary groups. The first one is, who are your partners or your potential partners? So in Georgia Power's respect, that we've got a lot of land, we're on a lot of rivers. That's going to be the resource agencies, that's going to be the environmental NGOs. They're constantly reaching out to us, asking us questions, talking about things. So that's where we could have an impact. The other is just your customers, right? What do your customers care about? And then look at where is the overlap there, right? So our customers, Jennifer mentioned it, want safe, clean, reliable, and affordable electricity. So how do we do what we're going to do? How do we transition the grid? How do we manage all this land we have? How do we reduce water use in ways that hit that safety and cleanliness part, but still get at the affordability and the reliability that the customers want, and even the sustainability goals that the customers really want to see?
That's interesting to think think about it from the customer standpoint and to model your programs to kind of check those off.
Just jumping off that a little bit, we have struggled a little bit because a lot of our customers, major food manufacturers, think of peanut butter, candy, snacks. They, like I said earlier, they all have their sustainability metrics that they're wanting to hit, and they all want to source sustainable products. However, we haven't gotten to a point where they're ready to pay that premium for some of those products. And so, some of our growers are saying, well, if we're going to do these things or step up, are we going to get paid a premium? So there's a little bit of a disconnect still. That's why we feel it's really important for us to start capturing a lot of the data so that we can tell that story and hopefully capitalize that for our growers in the future. But there is still a little bit of a disconnect. So I think you're 100% correct. Knowing what your customers want is really important, but also we have to get the customers to be willing to pay for some of the things that they're asking for.
And again, I think that goes back to the storytelling too, what you
Absolutely.
mentioned before. But I think, and Seth, if you want to weigh in on this, certainly do. But I have another question since you mentioned data, Rachel, about data.
I'll just be brief and echo some of what was already said. The landscape is changing so quickly. There are going to continue to be lots of opportunities to be innovative. And I'd say, from the university perspective, reach out to the universities. I understand there's a little technical school up the road here too. They may have some people who know some things. But
shade.
UGA is also, very excited to partner. If you're saying, well, we've got real challenges in this space, I'm not sure how we overcome that. That's the kind of stuff we'd love to get engaged with. How do we overcome these barriers? And maybe it's the way the rules are written. The way the federal programs are in place need to change. We're interested in helping with that kind of thing too. Yeah, be creative, reach out.
Okay, so thinking about, again, sustainability programs have been around for a while, but do you think we've gotten to a point, to your point, Rachel, that you made, that we have enough data to help us, guide these sustainability programs going forward, or even to, help us with our sustainability management outcomes? I mean, talk about the data a little bit and how you're capturing that data and how you're using it.
Well, I think some industries have done a lot better job than we have. We're a little bit farther behind in agriculture, and we're doing a little bit of a catch-up. The cotton industry is a little even ahead of the peanut world. They have the U.S. Trust Protocol for cotton capturing data, but it's without data, none of this matters. And so we are, capturing a tremendous amount from each grower, creating spidergrams, showing them how they can improve, but also making it voluntary. And that has helped, not forcing them into that, to make them then see, let's look at my data compared to the average and how I can get better, and it shows you those things. But, especially on water usage, I've mentioned cover cropping, reduced and no-till, et cetera. Those things can have a tremendous impact on your carbon footprint as a farmer, and measuring that. So, I think we have a tremendous way to go, but we are learning from a lot of people as well.
So never ask a biologist if you need more data, because the answer is always yes. I think you can look at it a couple different ways. Like if I think about one of our sustainability goals is in electric transportation, there's a lot of metrics you can manage there. Those things are, those cars are spec built in factories. Kind of what they're putting out, what they're doing. When I think about us managing longleaf pine forests for things like the gopher tortoise and indigo snake, it gets a lot harder, right? Because we can know how many acres we have,
Right.
but every acre's different.
Yeah.
So we don't know specifically what that's going to do towards the ultimate goal. So I think when you're thinking about data, like focus on the duty that lies nearest. Like what is the main point that you're trying to find out? Is it gopher tortoises? Is it indigo snakes? Is it longleaf pine habitats? And then build your data needs around that.
I think that's excellent advice, because our ability to collect data has increased exponentially over and over these last few decades. And there's some areas where we're just awash in data, and it's easy to spend, to get sucked into that, looking at those and looking at certain things which actually aren't quite related to the question you need to answer, or to your main objectives and your main points. So keeping that in mind. And there's always going to be cases, despite all this data, where we don't have the key bits of information that we need. So figuring out how to make the best decisions you can with limited information, I think is also, that's one of the areas of research of mine that I'm actually fascinated by. We are constantly having to make hard decisions when we don't have information we'd like. And we need to be willing to make those as best we can.
You guys have been great about leading me to the next question. It's almost like they knew the questions. I don't know. But I think what you were just saying there, it does lend itself to what's missing. So we have the data, but what's really missing to drive growth in this sector? What information, if it's not information, what is missing? What do you need?
Money is always helpful. But, I think from our perspective, outside of the data missing, just from us, you all are awash in data and we lack it. So we really are in need of that. I mean, funding's a huge part of that. But also, really, we just got to be able to tell our story and make sure that we're documenting and we're documenting what we're doing and improving from that. But I think data is what we're missing personally.
Maybe we're not missing this, but I would say patience. If you think back 10 years ago, we wouldn't have even been here, right? But what the sustainability space looked like, what everyone's respective companies and sectors were doing, we've made a lot of ground up. And I know a lot of times it's more. But step back and see where we've been and think about where we're going. And sometimes you have to be a little bit patient because a lot of this is technology driven and we're figuring out as we go.
Yeah, I'd say right now things are changing so fast and evolving so quickly that I'm hesitant to say what's the thing that's missing. I think we're still coming to terms with things in the day-to-day as the next thing comes around the corner. I think we might be out of time. Do we need to wrap this up?
We are. We're just there. So, but let me thank the panel. Of course, I could talk to y'all all day because it was just really insightful, some of your points that you've made. And I hope that you all appreciated having this conversation. But let's thank our panel.